Well, it's another day and another championship managerial special as we return as promised today to discuss the Swansea City change over the last couple of weeks. Out the door goes Alan Sheehan, who was sacked at the start of the international break, and he is replaced a couple of weeks later by Vitor Matos, who comes in from Maritimo on a near 4-year deal. Now, we've discussed a little bit about Swansea City already yesterday in a Middlesbrough special because, of course, they were heavily linked with Kim Hellberg. You can find that up in the eye above. It's going to be an interesting one, this, because I've got pretty strong feelings on both sides of it. And I know that obviously there's been a lot of change in the backroom and the boardroom at Swansea over the last year or so. So be intriguing to see who agrees and disagrees. It's only a light-hearted opinion, of course. Be respectful. You can have whatever opinion you want down in the comments. Let us know what you think of this appointment. But as always, we're going to discuss the new man, the old man, and what we think for the future of Swansea City. And we're going to start, of course, as always, by discussing the tenure of Alan Sheehan, who managed 39 games between his caretaker and his permanent stint in charge, and actually had a win rate of over 40% at Swansea City. He picked up 16 wins from 39 games, only lost 12 of them in total, but I guess the disappointment was that they had a poor run towards the end of his tenure, and it wasn't just the fact that it was poor, they'd started to concede quite a lot of goals too. However, they had been relatively solid for the most part and were still only a couple of wins from the playoffs at the time that he was sacked. Now, I've gone on record and said this in the weekly prediction show already. I do think it was premature, the sacking, but it was clearly with a target in mind. And obviously, there's no mistaking that that target was Kim Hellberg, who they eventually then missed out on, so had to move to a plan B. And that would have made a little bit more sense than perhaps what's happened. But overall, I actually think Alan Sheehan did a good job. I don't think his time in charge will have weakened his stock at all. And to be fair, you go back to last season when he took over from Luke Williams, and Swansea were actually drifting towards relegation trouble. And in the end, he took them up to not a million miles away from the playoff mix, which was a pretty remarkable effort. So I think Alan Sheehan deserves credit for the job he's done. Yes, it dwindled towards the end, and the form, considering the goals they were conceding, was not ideal. But that's something that is a vulnerability I feel in the Swansea team at the moment, rather than just in terms of the manager and the way they were set up. However, not quite enough goals. It takes time to build those sorts of teams. And look, most championship managers don't get it. But overall, I don't think he did a disastrous job. He did really well at the back end of last season, and it was an okay start to the season, which gradually drifted away. However, we're here to talk about the new man primarily, and that man is Vitor Matos. So let's go and have a look at the statement from Swansea City. They're delighted to confirm Vitor Matos as the club's new head coach. The 37-year-old arrives from Maritimo on a contract through to the summer of 2029, and he took charge for the first time last night as I'm recording this against Derby County. I wanted a couple of days to get all the stats and info right as well. Now, it says that he was identified as the standout choice for the role and was selected by his ability to implement a high-intensity, possession-based style of play. We'll talk about that quite a bit later on. His appointment continues Swansea's long record of providing opportunities to back in ambitious, technically focused young coaches, and Matos was the outstanding candidate throughout from those the club interviewed during what was a thorough but concise process, which means either the media are lying or Swansea City are just giving the usual blurb, because I think everyone acknowledged the fact that they were after Kim Hellberg until Middlesbrough went and nicked him. However, there's no doubt that Matos has got an incredibly good CV in terms of coaching, working with the likes of Jurgen Klopp at Liverpool, working with Red Bull Salzburg, for example, and now obviously as a head coach at Maritimo, where, to be fair, it does raise our first concern. He has only been a senior head coach prior to his Swansea stint for 12 matches. Yes, did well in them. Maritimo were up near the top of the division. They've now gone top, having won the first game after he left the club. But as a highly sought after young coach, yes, a lack of experience can be a problem, but it also brings a freshness, which is good as well. And as Swansea have mentioned, they've done that plenty of times. So Vitor Matos, with a 50% win rate, with a really good start to his time at Maritimo, is someone that's going to be interesting to watch out for. But we're going to need to discuss the playing style in a bit more detail in a minute. The boardroom are happy to have him in. They've talked about the influence of people like Luka Modric involved there as well. However, I do have a few concerns about this, I have to admit, and some of them sort of reared their head in the first game, if we're being honest, against Derby, albeit that will take time. Now, if we go and have a look at Matos at Maritimo this season, and one of the things that's happened there, we've seen a side that have been basically top of the average possession charts virtually every week of the season. but a side that have not been that ruthless in front of goal. Of the top six in the Portuguese second tier, they're actually the second lowest scorers at this stage of the season, albeit with a pretty good defensive record, but again, not the best one. 9 goals conceded from their first 12 matches, but he had produced a team that had dominated possession, but maybe not been able to convert that into being ruthless and creating bundles of chances. It had been 1s and 2-0s for the most part this year, and that's something that perhaps is going to be of interest. Now, there's no doubting in this situation that he's a very good coach. He's been highlighted at Liverpool for some of the players he's worked with, helped develop. Players have mentioned him as an important influence as well. And he's obviously been highly regarded by the likes of Klopp and Pep Linders in particular. So, no doubt there is a very good coach. I also love the fact that while he's bringing in his backroom staff, Joe Allen is helping behind the scenes at the club, and Leon Britton has come back short term as well. So giving him a bit of familiarity for Swansea. And it's something we do have to discuss, because I talk about the possession and maybe not converting it into goals, which has been something we've seen a bit at Maritimo. Obviously, they've been playing weaker opposition and been able to win most weeks. And we saw it again last night against Derby County. It was a really interesting game where Swansea had literally 3/4 of the ball, but Derby had more of the good chances, more of the breakaways, more of the shots on goal. And it's something we're seeing a pattern of in the Championship, probably in the last couple of seasons. A lot of teams trying to do what Burnley did, where they were dominating the ball. And to be fair, Swansea did it before with Brendan Rodgers at times, albeit they had a lot more pace on the counter-attack. They were able to attack teams at speed. Maybe this Swansea team hasn't got that. But we're seeing a lot of teams who dominate possession, play a high line, and then become very vulnerable to the break. And actually, the average possession stat for a winning team this season is down in the mid-40s. It's not what you would normally expect. So definitely something where controlling the game isn't translating into results. We've seen it at a lot of clubs, and it's going to be the biggest challenge for Vitor Matos at Swansea, because that's something that they've not been able to do. Now, under Alan Sheehan, they were playing in a slightly different way. He was trying to build a solid foundation, and then as they started to become more aggressive, we saw them start to ship goals, which is something that maybe suggests the Swansea team isn't capable of playing in that way at the moment. But there are some very good technical players in there, and with the right additions, I think they could push on to the next level still. But it does become a question of where does Swansea expect to be at the moment, because you look at some of the top squads in the division, and even some of those who are underperforming at the minute. Have Swansea got a team to compete with the top six? I'd argue from a neutral point of view looking at the moment, maybe not. Certainly not the squad depth to do so. But is there undoubted talent there that can be added to? Absolutely. So maybe for the future, that's something they can look at. But it is going to fall down to expectation. And obviously the immediate problem is to address the slide where the club haven't won in their last 5 matches. They've now lost 4 in a row. And in that game, dominated possession without really creating much clear cut at all, and looking incredibly vulnerable to the breakaway. We have to bear in mind that it's an inexperienced head coach that hasn't got all of his staff in at the moment, and those things are going to take time. And you never really know either when someone moves into that head coach or management role how they're going to react. I go back to my club, Luton Town, as an example, and the 2 Joneses, they're ones I always use. Nathan Jones adapted incredibly well to it. It took a bit of time, but became a natural leader of players. Whereas when Graham Jones stepped up from a number 2 role and came into Luton as a head coach for the first time, a fantastic coach, praised for his coaching abilities, his training sessions, but the man management, the media management, that side of things was a little bit all over the place and led to problems. So that's going to be the first challenge, but he's worked with the best, so you would imagine he's going to be in a very good situation there. You'd also expect some good backroom team members to come in and a couple of club legends to perhaps stay around. But I don't think we're going to see consistency from Swansea anytime soon, if I'm being honest. That's my personal opinion on it. And I do think they're going to need to improve the squad in January if they want to compete where they seem to think they want to at the moment. But I do love the fact, and I know that this goes sort of against what I've said in recent episodes in terms of manager styles, but I do like that Swansea have gone for someone that meets their philosophy a bit more. Swansea over the last 15 years, particularly in their most successful periods, have been a side that have been controlling games, have been in possession, have attacked at speed, and have really been on the front foot. We saw that side that came up from the Championship, that then got to Europe, that won the League Cup. And that is a side that obviously most Swansea fans are going to want to see because it was the most exciting period, but is also the way that became successful for them. So going back to that is perhaps not a bad thing in this instance, albeit we normally criticise a departure from style between managers, which in the last 2 or 3 for Swansea has potentially happened. One of the things we have got to talk about, though, is Swansea City's upcoming fixtures, because we always ask at this stage whether a manager's going to see out their contract, whether they're going to be a success. Now, look, a 4-year deal in a championship, quite frankly, is never getting seen out. If he's successful, he'll move on. If he's poor, he'll be sacked within the season. But this is timing. And I know the Derby game hasn't gone to plan, which is potentially a concern. But you look at the next 3 home matches that Swansea City have got. They're against Oxford, Portsmouth and Wrexham. Now, Oxford are generally dismal on the road. Pompey had the worst away record in the league last year, and Wrexham have had very little threat away from home in terms of trying to score goals recently since shutting up shop. So it's a chance for them to get points. However, they are all 3 teams that will sit behind the ball and play on the counter away from home. And Swansea's style, the high intensity passing game, is going to play into their hands there. So will they give up chances and results to breakaway teams again, as they did against Derby? And if they lose to the likes of Oxford and Pompey, who are in and around them at the moment, does that then put them on the back foot and in trouble going into what is then a more difficult festive period where they face the likes of Coventry, West Brom, Birmingham, Watford away from home, who are always strong at their own place, and Stoke City away in between the first few fixtures as well? There are some difficult matches there. And I do fear for Swansea that if they play into the hands of the opposition, if Matos is immediately going for this is my style and I'm going to stick to it, are they going to potentially get found out and drag themselves into trouble? At which point, momentum becomes a very key thing, whether they can turn the screw. I'm actually a little bit unsure on this one in terms of what the outcome's going to be. I kind of feel that it might be the right appointment at the wrong time. And that's why I was surprised about when the Sheehan move happened. And I guess, again, it was with the thought that they were probably chasing Kim Hellberg at the time. But I do fear at this stage of the season, it's maybe not the time to go for a very particular style. That is not the time to try and make sweeping change to the way you set up. And particularly with the games coming up, would they have got a few more points if they just stuck it out till maybe January and then made the change? I don't know. It's always going to be hard to tell and impossible to give an answer to. But I do worry a little bit. I think it could be a great appointment for the long term. But if the short term goes very wrong, that could be stopped very quickly. I do feel it's so important, those 3 home games we've mentioned, which are the 3 Swansea home games between now and the start of the January transfer window. I do feel it's pivotal that they pick up a couple of wins in there. And it's not going to be easy because although they're playing against sides that are poor away from home, the matchup of styles, as we saw with Swansea v Derby, albeit Derby a better and informed side, it does make it difficult because they give up chances on the break. They're going to have space in behind them. And all of those teams are looking to play that way. So I'm really intrigued. It's the first one where I'm not actually sure what to go with on the prediction. I thought they were going to have a steady, solid mid-table season under Alan Sheehan, and I think they were on course to do that. I'm not sure now what the case is going to be because you look at the bottom of the table. Norwich have started poorly under Clement, but will they pick up at some point? Sheffield United are starting to improve under Chris Wilder. Pompey are picking up results. Oxford are nicking points. And there's a couple of the sides that were down there in recent weeks that have now massively picked up, such as Southampton winning 4 in a row, Blackburn winning 4 in 5, for example. So I genuinely don't know how this one's going to work out. I do think if he has a positive start in that first month that we mentioned, he can go on and become a success at Swansea. But so often is the case for new managers and for managers in their first role. It is about those first few months because if it goes wrong, they're very quickly thrown out the door and not given a chance. Obviously, it would be an expensive mistake for Swansea if that were to happen. But I do wonder. I'm really interested by this one. I'm not convinced it's going to be a success or a dramatic failure. I'd probably have Swansea staying in lower mid-table about where they are at the minute. Maybe they're sacrificing their short-term position for long-term gain. I definitely think they need improvements in January if they're to reach the heights they thought they were going to this year. Because if they're sacking a manager a couple of wins off the playoffs, they've obviously expected to be up there. And I don't think they've got the squad to do so at the minute. It doesn't really matter what I think, though. Swansea City fans, what do you make of the appointment? Do you think Alan Sheehan was sacked too soon, as I said? Or was the style of football always going to lead to that? Were you willing to give him time to build a team? Or do you think the board made the right move? What did you think of the first game last night under the new head coach? Did you see the same old problems? Did you see the worries with keeping possession? Or do you think it will come right given a few weeks on the training ground? Let us know your thoughts on that. Will we see Swansea romp into 1 and 2-0 victories every week as Maritimo were at the start of the season? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you're a Championship fan generally, are you worried about this appointment for Swansea? Do you think it will go well? Do you think it will help or harm your club if you're in direct competition? And if you did enjoy this first look at Vitor Matos been appointed to replace Alan Sheehan at Swansea City. And please do put a thumbs up on it, subscribe, turn that notification bell on to make sure you don't miss a thing. We got plenty more manager specials to come this season, I'm sure. Championship predictions return tomorrow as we look ahead to the weekend action across Friday, Saturday and Monday. And as we mentioned a bit earlier, if you want to know more about Kilm Hellberg, about the Middlesbrough and Norwich manager specials recently, those are up in the playlist in the eye above. But thank you very much for watching as we have another new coach to the EFL Championship for the third time in the space of just over a week. Vitor Matos is in at Swansea City. It didn't start particularly prettily, but we'll wait and see if it picks up in the next few weeks. I'll see you tomorrow as we return for the weekend's Championship predictions.